Welcome to the Beauty Scientists with Dr. Kristy Hamilton and Dr. Roy Kim. Real beauty without the hype.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kristy Hamilton, and I'm here with my fellow board-certified plastic surgeon, Dr. Roy Kim, and we are the Beauty Scientists. Do we have a treat for you today? Dr. Kim just got back from Europe. You were in Paris, right?
Yes, I was at the IMCAS meeting, which is held in Paris, France.
And we are going to be talking about everything you learned, and we can debate whether Europe or North America is ahead of the game, but there's going to be definitely some new things because we all go through a different approval times with our FDA versus the relative governing bodies. I'm so excited to find out what you learned about last week.
Well, yeah, thanks. So IMCAS is a huge meeting. Typically, as you know, our meetings are 1,000 to 2,000 participants. This meeting had a whopping 18,000 participants.
Wow.
I had a couple friends there that I didn't even see. I couldn't go to the lectures because there are too many lecture options. And the exhibit hall, as you can imagine, the exhibit hall was fairly big, but it was jam-packed with some unique things, some unique products, injectables, fillers, dermatology, skincare stuff, which we'll talk about.
Okay, so let's start with injectables. What was your number one takeaway? What were some trends?
Some trends were Europe is different from the United States FDA. So the Food and Drug Administration is very much patient safety focused, not that Europe is not. Rather, the FDA has like huge barriers, large obstacles. I do feel that sometimes they want too much, and it's a lot more difficult to get any medication, pharmaceutical, injectable, filler approved for use in the United States. So in Europe, it's a lot easier, and it shows because there are a ton of brand names and booths and companies I never heard of that offer Botox equivalents as well as filler equivalents that basically similar product but much lower price.
Yes, as soon as we can make the commodities more available, and there's a lot more pricing competition. And I remember when you came back from South Korea, you were saying there were like 20 or 30 odd neuromodulators like Botox. And then for us, we've got, 4 over here. So big difference. Were there any new kind of standout novel products, like something completely different than traditional hyaluronic acid fillers and neuromodulators?
Yes. So the biggest thing was Regeneron. That's a Korean company, and they create sort of anti-aging, biostimulatory, regenerative aesthetics is what they call it. So as you know, fillers are made out of typically some type of chemical. So fillers fill. Some of the fillers actually have some biostimulatory component. They state or claim, or a little of both, that they produce collagen. So this is classically Radiesse, calcium hydroxyapatite, or Sculptra, which is PLLA. Regeneron, I'm going to have to be very careful about how I say this. And if you have any little kids in the room, you may not want to let them hear this. If you read the lay press, Regeneron is derived from salmon DNA. They thought that it's like more pure, it's a mammal, blah, blah, blah. And so they actually say in the press that it's from salmon skin. And they use the DNA and create PN, polynucleotide, and this actually helps regenerate tissue. The original research was actually done in wound care and pressure sores. So that's the very interesting component. From a cosmetic perspective, they inject it very similar to what we do in the US with filler, but it helps to regenerate skin. In other words, the stuff underneath the skin, it helps regenerate collagen. It gives your skin a better glow. It actually thickens skin. It helps a lot. So this is the thing. It's sort of hard to really accept that the fillers derive from salmon skin, but technically it's not. It is actually derived from male salmon ejaculate. So there you go.
No wonder they're not putting that right in the center of the advertising.
Yes. So yes, if you read the scientific nerdy articles, it is not from salmon skin. It's actually from something from the salmon, but it's not quite skin.
And there we go. Dr. Roy Kim, straight from Paris, went straight to the source, got the real info for all of you all. So you know what's actually going on. But that's interesting. I mean, I think we're seeing an increasing trend towards regenerative medicine, regenerative injectables, even how we're repurposing our own tissues. So was this like an impressive product? Were you seeing kind of similarities to radiation sculpture like we have already in the United States, or was there something about it that really made it stand apart to you?
I think the thing that stands apart is actually the scientific basis of wound care. So as you know, pressure sores, wounds that don't heal well, if you have diabetes or varicose veins, this product has been used successfully in humans to actually help with wound healing. So the fact that it can do that, I mean, it can do a lot cosmetically or aesthetically. And as you know, I think fat is the ultimate regenerative, wonder drug. But fat requires liposuction, fat harvest, processing, and placing it back in the human body. This stuff, you crack open a box and you inject it, and it actually has regenerative effects. The other interesting thing that they do with it is you can actually use it like a skin booster. So they have different forms of Regeneron. So you can actually inject it directly into your skin, not that deep, and it actually rejuvenates your skin, similar to Skin Vive, but it's a different product.
Okay. This is exciting. It looks like it kind of fills a different niche, which is always nice for us to have more tools in our toolbox. So we'll see how long it takes to come over here. Otherwise, we're going to have to make a professional field trip over to Europe to test these out.
Well, we could go to Korea and go directly to the factory. I don't know if you want to go to
right.
the fishery where they do aquaculture to derive the Regeneron, but that's a different story.
Only with you, Rory. That's exciting. So that is new and different. Plastic surgery, like we're founded originally our field in wound care and trauma reconstruction coming out of the world wars, and so we keep our finger on the pulse of reconstructive surgical practices and tools, and many of them for the same reason have kind of aesthetic characteristics and translational aspects to them. So that's exciting, and that's a very, very classic plastic surgery story, I think. What about in device land? Anything new in terms of lasers and other devices? I saw you were posting some things on Instagram that you found.
Yeah, so with lasers, not much new. As you know, wavelength is physics. So a wavelength is a wavelength, and if it helps with hair reduction or a congenital lesion like a birthmark, they have cheaper ones outside the US because they, again, don't have the same regulatory requirements. And frankly, they're just way overpriced in the United States. The second thing was they have cool devices that directly go towards micro needling and radio frequency. So as you know, there's RF microneedling. Microneedling, you create holes. RF is radio frequency energy. So when you have these metal rods, these tiny metal needles that create the hole, you zap it with RF energy and it heats up and it gives you a better result. They have handheld devices that do this. So these handheld devices are much smaller than this massive box with a handpiece that we're used to. I think there are like 13 or 14 different companies, including Morpheus and Vivace and Potenza and a bunch of other competitors in the RF microneedling space, but they're all fairly big devices. They have insulated needles, and they claim that they deliver RF like a certain pattern, a certain like strength, blah, blah, blah. To have a handheld device, uninsulated needles, lower energy, but delivering more energy because the needles are uninsulated, and delivering like very good results. I mean, I don't know if I actually believe what I saw in the brochures. It's that impressive.
Wow. I mean, just how much easier than having to like tote around the giant machine on wheels if you have something that you can walk around in your coat pocket, in essence. That is really neat. And again, it speaks to the power of having a broader market, which we get there eventually in the US, but to your earlier point, it's slower here. I saw one of your videos of the handheld radio frequency microneedling. I was like, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I can't imagine why that's not an achievable type of device in the US eventually as well.
Yeah, I think there has to be studies done because I know that the other competitors, other companies that exist in the US, I actually got a comment. They tried non-insulated needles or tips, and it didn't work very well. The energy was dissipated all over the place. So that's why they went to insulated tips. So if it's handheld with less energy, it still should work in theory. I don't know if it'll work in reality. And I have this other video I should post later today. Same device, slightly bigger, same company. However, it can also inject liquid or filler at the same time. So,
oh wow, it's like a skin booster, like into the skin while you're
zapping
feeding
it.
it.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. It's like two for one. We got everything we like: holes, micro trauma for collagen stimulation, and then direct injection of all the good stuff, the growth factors, the fillers,
Yeah.
everything for immediate glow and probably faster recovery too, because
Yeah.
you can kind of get all of the regenerative type topicals directly into the skin. That's
Yeah,
a
and a
great idea.
more consistent. So as you know, with like RF microneedling, it's very consistent because you're having a machine like make the hole and deliver the energy. With Skin Booster, it's harder because you use a device where it's very consistent. But if you're doing it by hand, it's just hard to always have the same depth with 25, 50, 200 shots in the face. These machines do it very efficiently. So I'm looking forward to some of those coming to the United States.
So I wonder, so are you happy to be a US plastic surgeon, or are we feeling like we need to move to Europe?
I don't know. I'll tell you one thing. Like, I've never trained in Europe. I've never worked in Europe, so it's hard for me to say. I do think that they have more toys overseas in Europe. I don't know if that necessarily gives you better results because they're not that different from what we have in the US. They may be getting certain things a year or two before us, but honestly, if it works there, it'll definitely come to the US. If it doesn't work there, it's never going to come to the US.
Yeah, I don't mind that either, because I feel like so many of these devices, even the ones we get, like sometimes we're underwhelmed with what they do relative to the promise. So you can imagine if that's like the cream of the crop that we're getting after some more rigorous market tests elsewhere, it's probably just as well saves us from having even more devices that we don't use, right?
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything absent in the European market that we have here, or is everything kind of funneled from the continent over our way?
I think the big thing is surgery in and of itself is the same or similar in Europe, but I do think that there are a lot more surgical trends in the United States. I think it's because we're a huge country, lots of different ethnic groups, lots of different surgeons, though even though we have similar training at the same institutions, we're very creative and come up with new ways of doing things. So I know that we come up with a lot of innovation surgically. And for whatever reason, I think it may be a little harder in Europe, which is why they have international conferences. You know, you could be the top dog, but if your country only has like 20 or 30 million people, there's not that much, how do you say it, like, psychological, intellectual discourse, discussions, innovations, because you live in a relatively small country. This is why I think a lot of European plastic surgeons join international societies to get a little more learning, wider breadth of knowledge, things of that nature. So it's not like the US is rah, always number one and better, but because of the diversity, because we travel, because other people come here, because like people like me go to Europe and Asia for other plastic surgery conferences, there's a lot of that cross-fertilization. And I think the second big takeaway is that we have Daxify in the US and it's widely used in the US and we have a lot of experience. It's not that widely used in Europe at all yet.
So we do have something that started here first before it went over. Yeah, I totally agree. I think, North America, we're a huge melting pot of everybody, and that, variety in anatomy and different ethnicities, all of that keeps it exciting and allows for a greater breadth of problem solving. So I think we are very fortunate, and it is nice that now people travel internationally, because I know you always bring back really interesting ideas whenever you go abroad. So I haven't done much in the way of outside of North America conferences, but I feel like that's something I should do with you in the future.
Definitely we're going to drag you to Korea sometime, because that conference is not just a good conference, it's actually entirely in English. Like the whole conference is in English. So
I would love that because I admire so much of the South Korean, like their like skincare and just how innovative they are. So I think that'd be really, really neat. I'd love to go with you.
Yeah, and then if we could ever drag you to Paris for a conference, if you could tolerate that, then that'd be a fun conference to go to.
I think I could be forced to go to Paris for a weekend.
Yeah.
I think it would be okay. The final thing I wanted to bring up that you mentioned before we started recording was just like the difference in how people are trained by industry in Europe compared to the US system. Could you touch on your thoughts on that, how it's different, and whether you think one's maybe better than the other?
Yeah, I can't necessarily comment on every single specialty, and I can't comment. I mean, we can only comment really on like what we're trained with, really with injectables, fillers, and newer technology. Because any doctor, we're learning new stuff. There are new medications, there's new techniques, and it's not like, oh, I trained in this in med school or in my surgical training program, because if it just came out a year or two ago, that's impossible. As weird as it may sound to the conspiracy theorists and people who hate big pharma in the United States, I do think that the US is a little less biased because it's a little more transparent and open. If it's a newer medication, a newer technique, it's pretty clear that we're trained by the companies or the medical device companies or pharma companies on how to use it. And there are actually also journal articles that are pretty unbiased. And even if they're biased, a lot of them, they state their bias. You can figure out where people work. You can figure out where if they actually work for a company, where the study came out from. Europe's very different. I mean, especially in smaller countries, it's sort of hard to get excellent training because the market just isn't there. So some filler injectable medical device company, they're not that interested in like training you if you come from a smaller country. So they will fly you out to like a bigger European city for training, but it's very clear that you're being trained by the actual medical device, the laser company, the injectable company, the filler company. And I do think there's more bias. And part of that is because there are just simply fewer, let's say, less biased, open training options if you're especially coming from a smaller country. I don't think that's necessarily Europe. I think the problem is if you're from a smaller country.
Just the size. I know. And I think that's one thing that we do pretty well in the United States is like, look, it's like, I think partnering with industry and working together is great. I mean, we have knowledge, they have knowledge, they have technology. They want to know how we think, what we want, what our patients are looking for. So I think to collaborate like that is a great thing. It's not something to run away from. Otherwise, you kind of have this separation of minds, right? And it makes it hard for them to know what we want. On the flip side, I think it's really important to be transparent about that. And it's one thing I really admire about all the North American conferences. It's just everyone's very clear about like who's paying them, if they're being paid, whether it's voluntary or not, just so you know. And then they know too when they get up there and make their speech kind of where their platform is. And so I think it's great that we have as much transparency as we do. Because we do want to have the industry support, but we also don't want all that, as we want as little bias as possible creeping in, although there will always be some.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so it's nice to see that, the US is, I don't know, I think it's less biased, but even if you don't think that, it's definitely more transparent.
Yes. So there's no perfect, but I think we do that really well. Well, this is great. Well, thank you for traveling all the way to Paris, Dr. Kim, so that you could educate us on what's going on in Europe. I'm sure that was a very difficult couple of days for you over there.
Yeah, I took one for the team. I just had to go to Paris and go to this conference.
That was great. Well, I can't wait for the next one. And thank you all so much for listening. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comment section and we will expand on any topics of interest. So as always, you all stay beautiful out there, and I always enjoy chatting with you, Dr. Kim.
Well, it's always great to see you and talk to you. And as always, stay beautiful out there.
Thank you for joining us on The Beauty Scientists. Be sure to visit thebeautyscientists.com and learn more about modern beauty and connect with Dr. Hamilton and Dr. Kim.